Hey everybody, Shawnee here. So just to kind of give you a heads up, and the reason for me actually showing my face on my tutorial video, which is something you guys know I don't do very often, but I want to kind of introduce a concept that you will find confusing. Some of you might, I don't know, but you might find it confusing when I actually do the streams of me developing my app. And one of the things that, and there's a lot of articles out there and a lot of opinion about design patterns. So I'm not going to dive into what's the best design pattern for your app and you should follow this design pattern, because everyone does it a little different. I'm following a general design pattern, which is model view controller. And so basically what that is a way of developing software that divides the application into basically distinct parts. Like each part does its own thing, and then they talk to each other via variables or protocols, and they pass certain information on, but they don't have access to everything. So certain elements should only have one responsibility. For example, if it's handling just like a model, like the actual data, where it defines the data and what's available to the data, that's the only thing it should handle. Or if a file or has a manager where it adds and edits and deletes, it should be in its own little capsulated area. So what I'm going to introduce is basically a very simple version of that, where I'm going to actually be separating out the controller portion from the actual view, and my example is going to be with a table view controller, a table view and a controller. So I'm not going to show the data portion, but if you decide to view my streams of me building my app, you will see this in action. And I'll also goes into a design pattern called a model view controller, or MVC. I am using a version of that for building my app. I have a model file that handles just handling the model and defining what the data is and what types it are. And then also I have the view, which just handles showing the view, showing elements of the view, and then I have a controller, or a data manager as I like to call it, because it actually does all the work on the data. So it adds data, it deletes, it edits, does really fun stuff. So I just want to give you an intro into separation of concerns, a little bit of intro to design patterns, not much. Definitely look into it because everyone has their own version of design pattern. I'm not going to go into that discussion. So, I will have some video or some links down below if you're interested in learning more, at least ones that I found very helpful. And let's go ahead and move on to the tutorial. All right. Hello, welcome back. If you're new, welcome. In this video, I am going to basically build a table view. Go ahead and open up a new project, single view project, and then go to your main .storyboard, and we can begin. So typically when we build an app that has like a table view, or a view control that has a table view or a collection view, what typically happens is, let's go ahead and just drag a table view and resize it here. So we have our table view. So typically what happens is, especially when you deal with tutorials, they put everything in the view controller. Now, if you have a lot of things going on or a lot of buttons, as well as the table view that you have in there, or if you have something else in there like a collection view or something like that, the view controller can get quite big quite fast. So I was on the search of finding out how to separate concerns and how to separate certain aspects of a bloated view controller. So let's go ahead and create a bloated view controller. I know that sounds not very intuitive, but it helps illustrate and it helps with figuring out how to do it on your own. So at least help me out. Hopefully it helps you out. So let's go ahead and add a TableViewDelegate and TableView UITableViewDatasoure. And we need to, so it says it does not conform, so we need to add some protocol stubs here. Now we can go ahead and click on that. But if you have viewed any of my other prior videos, you know I am very fond of snippets. So I have my table view basic actions that you will typically need to use just for a very basic table. So I'm going to drag this on here. All right, so you will need number of sections. So we need to remove these overrides. We don't need them. That's why it's erroring out. And that's fine. Okay, so whenever you have a table view, you need to have number of sections. You need to have number of rows in the section. Self for row at. If you have a section, if you have sections, more than one section, you can do title for your sections, but I only have one, so, and I don't need a title, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that method. And then we have data select row at. Now this is what, some action will occur if you select a row. At this point, I'm not going to add anything other than a print statement letting me know, hey, you touched me. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to do you've tapped row, and then we do some string interpolation here, and this is index path dot row, and there we go. So this will output in when we run it. If we hit a row, it will say what row number we have tapped on. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need some category or some source, an object, in order to work with this. So let's go ahead and create a variable. Actually, let's create a constant. We're going to do quotes. So we can add certain things here in order to go through it, an array or something like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a class. So let's go ahead and create a class. Let's create a new file, Swift file, and name it quote. Alright, so now we have our quote file. We don't need to import anything other than foundation. Let's do our class, which is quote. And our quote will have a saying. Of course, you had to have something for it to be a quote, right? It's going to have a author, and that's going to be a string. And then we'll add an image at some point. I'm going to do UI image. So if you notice, UI image isn't appearing. So what we need to do is actually import UIKit, and then it will be available for us. So UI image, there it is. And this is going to be optional. We don't need to necessarily have an image available if we don't want one, but it's nice to have. So let's do a init. Let's initialize all of our properties. So saying and author is required, whereas image isn't. So we're going to UI image equal to nil. So if nothing comes in, it automatically will set itself to nil. So we're going to do self saying equals saying, self author equals author, self image equals image. Okay, and that error should go away, and there it goes. All right, so we have our class. We have saved everything. Let's go back to our view controller. So now let's create a an array of quotes. All right, so we do quote, and there's our class. And if you notice, we have an option of having an image, but we also have the option of just having a saying and an author, and that's what we're going to use. So I'm just going to create some empty space here. I'm going to have 2 quotes for right now, just because it's easier and only have 2 quotes. So you can just copy and paste. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. So gotta copy, paste. All right, so let me think of a quote. All right, so you can add your own quotes here, but I already have a set of quotes, so I'm gonna go ahead and paste them here. Now I'm not sure if Elon Musk or Joe Rogan actually said these 2 or created, or were the ones who these sayings belong to, but I heard both of them on a podcast, Joe Rogan's podcast, so I'm trying to remember exactly who said what, but I don't take my word for it. It could be somebody entirely different who, these quotes are from. So don't take me on my word at this. That's the quotes I remember. Okay, so number of section size only 1. Because I just want 1 section. Then object count. Now how we typically do is we do quotes.count. And then for our cell, we need to go ahead and set that up. So let's go back to our main view controller. Let's hit our table view. And we need 1 prototype cell. And we need to make the cell custom. So let's go ahead and bring in a label. Let's set this up. Perfect. All right, I do not like system. I hate looking at system fonts, so let's go ahead and change that to custom. You don't have to do this, but I don't like seeing it. So let's do Ventura, why not? That looks great. Let's increase the size just a tad. All right. Lines, we're going to do 0. Basically, we want it to wrap. We can leave truncate till, and let's go back to our cell, and we are going to do custom. The identifier is going to be cell, and then we need to do a custom height. You don't have to, but I'm going to, because I know this is, depending on how long the quote is, it will wrap. All right, and then let's go back to the label and remove the text here. Okay, perfect. All right, I'm gonna just drag this on down. Do alignment. Okay, and then the next thing we need to do is get rid of these warnings. So basically there's no constraints. So let's have it add the constraints for us. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's go back to our view controller. Now if you are manually adding a cell using storyboard, you can do this. I left this here for my own info, so I'm just going to delete it because I don't need it. So my cell identifier is cell, and then the object that contains the data that we need is our quotes. So let's go ahead and do quotes, and then the index will be indexPath.row. Okay, so now that we have everything, oops, dot string. So we need the saying. There we go. Okay, so we shouldn't have any issues. But another thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a different or another method here. This is for the cell height, because we did custom, so we're going to do height for row at. So it asks it like it for the height to use for a row in a specified location. I'm doing this mainly because of the fact that it is custom and I don't want any issues. So I'm specifying, hey, the row height should be 100. So that's what I've typed there. Okay, so let's go ahead and build and run, make sure that our project is working. Okay, so I forgot to do the reuse identifier for cell. So go ahead and do that. So click on table view and add cell. Let's try this again. Alright, so the reason why this isn't working is we forgot to set the table views delegate and data source. So let's go ahead and do that. And now it should work. And there we go. So we know it works. Perfect. All right, so let's go ahead and stop. Now, you might be saying, well, that's fine. I mean, why would you want to move this all out? Well, if you're going to have buttons in here and more information, for example, I actually have a project I'm working on where I need to remove bloat. So let me see if I can find it. All right, so here is not the best example. Well, this is a great example of a view controller that only has a table view delegate and data source. But the thing is this also has outlets. It has more properties. It has height. It has things to do after the view did appear. It has a lot of stuff, and this is a fully functioning basically app. I mean, view controller, and you see there's a lot of junk in here. So this is what I'm talking about in regards to view controller bloat. Just because I have just this little amount, if you start adding other things like buttons and different labels and all different kinds of functionality, it can get really gnarly and very fast, and it's hard to read, especially if you're coming back into it again. You know, taking a break or whatnot. So let's go ahead and start removing some things. So first of all, the view control is only supposed to be worried about the view. It's supposed to be loading the view, and that's it. So why is it also handling the data coming in? Well, it shouldn't. So let's go ahead and work on that first. So first thing we would need to do is we need to have a quote manager. So let's go ahead and create a new file, Swift file, and name it quote manager. Okay, so here's a quote manager. We can leave foundation as is. Let's do class quote manager. Doesn't need to be any type. So, so the first thing we need to do is we need to separate out the quotes. So any quotes that we have shouldn't be edited or modified at all, unless there is a variable, a property, or a method or function that actually does the looking for it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a private variable. And now what this does is it will keep the variable private, so it can only be viewed inside this class. It can't be viewed outside at all. And we're going to do a quote list, and this is going to be an array of quotes. So we're going to initialize it so it's ready and opened, ready to use. And then we need the quote count. So we can't call the array quote list from outside of this class. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another variable that can be seen and that will actually return the quote count. So we're going to do quote, it's going to be an integer, and it will return a value which is the quote list count. So still it's the quote list, the array is still contained, encapsulated in this class, but the count is now visible. Another thing that we need to do is we need to be able to get the quote at a particular index. So we do function get quote at index, and this is going to be an integer. And what it's going to do is it's going to return quote, just a instance of a quote. And so let's see. We need to go ahead and do return, and then we do quote list at the index. So this allows us to still get access or to see the values in here, but just not directly, and that's the point. We don't want things to be seen directly. Okay, and then another thing we need is the setup. So when we first load, we can do like, let's see here, load. All right, so we need to do load quotes. We're going to have some quotes coming in when the app first loads. They were saved. We want them to be there and available, so we need to add them to our list. So it's going to be an array of quotes. It's not going to return anything because it's going to do work. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have to do a quote list equals quotes. All right. How do we just do load? Load existing. There we go. Now that makes sense. Let's go and drag this up here. All right, so let's go ahead and modify our view controller. So we're going to copy this here. Let's go ahead and delete this. So we're going to do var, we're going to bring in the quote manager. So quote manager equals quote manager. So we initialize a version of quote manager. And then in the viewDidLoad, we're going to perform, we're going to load the quotes that we have. So we're going to do quote manager dot load existing quotes, and we're going to paste our existing quotes. Make sure we have our square brackets. It's important to have those square brackets. Okay, so we're going to have some errors here, which we do because we no longer are using quotes. So to do quote count, if you remember, we do quote manager and do count, quote count. We'll get that. Yes. Okay. And then here in our viewDidLoad, it's asking us, hey, replace quotes, blah, blah. What we will do is we will pull out the saying out of the quotes, the quote manager, get quote at index, which is index path dot row. Okay, got me saved. Oh, we of course I could get the saying out, of course. All right, so we have our quote manager, our function, and then the what we're trying to pull out, which is the saying. So let's go ahead and save and build. All right, so it still works. So we pulled out the functionality. We now use our quote manager to manage all of our quotes. We loaded it from the viewDidLoad, so that's great. So another thing we need to do is we shouldn't have our view controller handling the table view. It is its own little guy, so it should be doing its own little thing. So what we need to do is we need to create a new class. So let's do a new file, Swift file, and name it data provider. Alright, so we have our new file. The first thing we need to do is we need to import UIKit, because that's the only way we're going to have access or even see the table view classes. So we're going to do a class, we'll name it data provider. And this is going to be of type NS object. It's also going to be a UITableViewDatasoure and UITableViewDelegate. Okay, so the first thing, of course, we need to do is we need to have a quote manager in here because it does need to talk to it. So we do var quote manager, and that's going to be of type quote manager. And this is going to be optional because there might not be, quotes available. Okay, so this is whining that it does not conform, which we know. Let's go ahead and look at our view controller, because that has all of the data, or all of our protocol methods. So basically what we're going to do is we're just going to copy what's over here and bring it over here. Okay. And then we're going to have errors, yes, and I'll fix that in just a moment. So what we need to do is remove, this is where we start removing things. So we're going to remove the stubs, and we're going to remove the classes. Okay, it's going to be funky, but bear with me. So now our view controller is looking way cleaner than it was, which is awesome. That's what we wanted. Okay. So let's get back and edit our quotes, our data provider. So we're going to, sorry, I'm keep on reading quotes, so sorry about that. All right, so it's saying, okay, value of optional quote must be unwrapped, which is true, we do need to unwrap it. But the thing is we have to be careful because the quotes coming in could be the 0. So what we need to do is we need to enter in a couple of guard statements, just to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we're going to do quote manager equals quote manager. Now this is the quote manager inside of this function is not accessible outside the function. So I'm saying the quote manager inside this function should equal the one that's outside if it's valid. If it's not, what we need to do is return 0 for our number of rows. Because if it doesn't have anything, it should return 0. Otherwise, it's going to do quote manager.quote, which is fine, which is perfect. That's exactly the functionality we want. Sorry, I'm just cleaning it up a little bit. All right. So we got that. And then we've got this other one that we need to fix. Now this is the same thing. We need to make sure that the quote manager actually has something. So let's do another guard statement. And the condition is let quote manager equal quote manager. And then if it isn't, then we need to actually do a fatal error because something messed up and we need to know what that might be. So let's do quote manager failed. Kind of descriptive. That's the whole point. Be as descriptive as possible. There's nothing worse than trying to find an error somewhere. Okay. So, but then if it is successful, what we need to do is we need to pull that data out. All right, so what we need to do is we need to pull that data out. So let's do let quote. This is going to be, hopefully, of type quote. And that should equal the quote manager dot get quote at the index. So index path dot row. And now, once we assign it, what we need to do is we need to do quote dot saying. So it's really clean and clear. All right, and that's all we have to change. Okay, actually we need to do one more thing. So for quote manager, what we need to do is we need to get this data from somewhere, and that somewhere is going to be the view controller. But we need to specify within our data provider, it needs to be a class basically, or protocol, because we need to expose this variable outside of this class so that the view controller can get information from it or set it. So let's go ahead and create a protocol. So we do protocol. And the name is, let's give it a good name. What should the name be? We're going to do, let's just make it really clear that it's the quote manager, which is the variable settable. And basically we're going to expose our variable here, the quote manager variable here. So we do var quote manager. And it's going to be, quote manager optional set and get. Okay, and then the data provider here also needs to include the protocol. Okay, all right, let's save that. All right, so before we go any further, we do need to connect our data provider, because at this point it's not connected to anything. So let's go to our main storyboard. This is going to be quite fun. So what we want to do is we want to get an NS object, because if you remember, that is one of the classes that we provided. So let's go ahead and insert that, and we see here's our object up here. Now our object class needs to be our data provider that we provided. So now it is connected. All right, now we need to do one more thing, is that we need to connect our data provider as well as our table. So let's go ahead and do assistant editor. And we should have our view controller on one side and our view on the other. So basically, let's create a little bit of room here. All right, so we're going to click on our data provider, hold down the control key and drag. And the type is data provider, but we're just going to name it data provider because that's exactly what it is. Just make an outlet, a strong outlet, and connect it. And then we need to go to our table view and do the same thing. Control, drag, release. The storage is actually going to be strong. It's going to be, it exists. There's no reason why it should disappear. So we're going to make it strong, and this is just going to be our table view. There's really nothing else to it. All right. So now we have our table views connected, as well as our data provider, which is awesome. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to set up the table views delegate and data source. And because we didn't, do the control drag from here to here and set it, actually we need to remove these. We're going to set manually. So let's hit our table view. Let's delete the view controller links, because we're going to do this manually. We want the table view to look at the data provider as its delegate and its data source, because that's what it is. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do table view delegate equals data provider, and then table view data source is the data provider as well. And then we also now need to set the data provider's quote, data provider, it's quote manager. And what we need to set that to is the quote manager up here, because that's where the data is coming in. So quote manager. I don't know why that errored out. Like, why is that erroring out? All right, so we have, I believe, everything. I think we have everything. So let's go ahead and save all of our changes and let's build and run. Oh yeah, I gotta stop it first, then build and run. And what do you know, it works. All right, friends, we have done a lot. We had an over-bloated view controller and we separated it out into our data provider and our quote manager. From here, you can add more functions like removing and adding quotes. There's a lot you can do with the quote manager, but now all your functionality is separated from the main view controller. Now our view controller is really clean, very clear, and it looks wonderful. If this has helped you at all, just give it a thumbs up. Doesn't cost you anything. Subscribe if you want to get my videos. Till next time, keep calm and quote on.